Hi, friends, and welcome back to Big Important Conversations. I'm thrilled to be here with Linda Hurtado, an Emmy-winning journalist who has over 20 years of experience on air. And our conversation today is indeed important, perhaps one of the most important conversations we can have, which is about why it's so important to go after what we most fear to live a life that thrills us. So, Linda, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. I love to talk about thrills and chills because I think if you're not feeling either or maybe both, you're not living your full life, right?
Oh,
You're
that's
just,
so good.
yeah, you're just kind of going through the motions. So
I completely
let's talk
agree.
about thrills and chills.
Yes. Okay, but take us back because I think there's a lot of people, myself included, who for a while were like, you have to play it safe. Our parents taught us to play it safe. Go after this, credible career path. And I know that you, right out the gate, you took a job that was a salary of like $13,000 to follow your real passion. And like, that's so scary. I know so many people who want to, quit their day jobs to go after their side hustles, but that fear element is there. Were you always the type of person who we're like, let's go after it, I'm a daredevil?
A couple of different things. I've always been the type of person that believes that hard work will pay off. I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to work hard. So there's that. And then I'm also the type of person that when challenged, like, you can't do this, you can't survive on $13,000 a year, I'm like, oh yes, I can,
Watch me.
so bring it on, right? So when I found out that was after going to school for 4 years and having to work 3 jobs to get through college, that I was only going to be making $13,000 a year, I thought, okay, well, how am I going to do this, right?
Yeah.
And I had help, and not everybody does, but my mom would come, and while she didn't have a lot of financial help, she would go grocery shopping and pack my cupboards full of food. And you learn how to pay the most important bills first so that the electricity stays on, and you learn how to recycle clothes or borrow clothes from friends. I mean, it even got to the point where I would go to the restaurant that was having happy hour appetizers for free and eat dinner. I mean, I was interning one summer in Washington, D.C. because I wanted to see if I wanted to be a political reporter. And so I would I knew I could tell you what bar in DC had free appetizers on what night. And that's where we would go to eat. And people might think, wow, that's such a struggle, but it was really one of the best times of my life because I was doing what I loved. And I was doing it on my own, and I was figuring it out. And so even though it wasn't the ideal, a driver taking me to work and making so much money I can, shop wherever, it was still just a blast of fun. And I would never do it any other way because it taught me a really strong work ethic too. You just work through it.
Absolutely. And you prioritize that passion and happiness first, because I also know so many people who right out of college went into a job in finance or consulting and they hate it. I mean, nothing against those industries, but like my friends, they hated it, but they're like, I don't know how to let go of like a 6-figure salary. And it's such a powerful perspective to think instead, it's okay if you're, scraping together pennies, because that's actually what life is about. Like, you aren't here to play it safe. You're here to live the most fantastic life possible.
And I could tell you now, fast forward a couple of decades, and now I am working in Tampa and making good money and, have a great job and am successful at it. People know who I am. So I finally reached that top peer. And then I realized I'm no longer happy at the place that I'm working for a number of reasons. I went through breast cancer, and that changed my perspective on a lot of things and taught me to put happiness first. I felt like the workload was just kind of egregious at this station at the time. I was having to carry a camera, shoot my own video, write my own stories, edit my own stories, which is all fine, but I was a breast cancer survivor. I just had surgery on the muscles used to lift, and so it was a struggle for me physically every day, and it became a struggle emotionally, and so I was unhappy. But how do you walk away from that job that's paying you a boatload of money and you're successful at it and you're well known? What are your options at that point, right? And most of the time, fear will keep you glued to the seat and keep you from taking the next step. But I have a great husband, and I went to him and I told him how I was feeling, and he said, well, when's your contract up? And I said, 2 years. And he goes, give me 2 years, I'll pay everything off, and you can walk away, and you don't have to worry about a job until you want a job. And so that's another thing I want to tell people. Sometimes you can't have what you want the next day, right?
Yeah.
Like it took us 2 years literally to get to the point where I could walk away. But
Mm.
I guess the end to that story is as I decided to walk away, um, my agent called and said, "Hey, there's a posting for a Monday through Friday anchor job across the street at the number one station. Would you like me to call?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, I didn't know the news director, but go ahead." So it just turns out that one of their main anchors was retiring,
Wow.
and she would be leaving in December, like December 1st, and my non-compete, my 6-month non-compete would end at the end of November.
Oh my
So
goodness.
that was
It's just
just
so cool how
kismet.
that timing sets up, and it's like it was meant to be and you set the intention. And I love what you said about that too. Like nothing is an overnight success, but
Right.
the podcast episode that I actually had come out today was about we can put up with so much if we see it as a means to an end. So same with
Yes.
you, like starting at this $13,000 salary job, you saw it as a means to an end because you're like, this is my dream. So
Right.
I'm okay with being hungry and fighting for my
Right.
passion, hungry in multiple ways,
Exactly.
hungry for success and also eating my free appetizers
That's right.
because
Ramen
I
noodles.
know that
Ramen
it's going
noodles.
to get
That's what they're
better.
called. Yeah, I think I lived on those a lot.
You lived off what?
Ramen noodles. Just add water.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yes. So good too. That makes me want some.
Yeah.
I'm sure you can only have so many before you don't want them ever again.
I just really never. I guess when you're in the struggle, maybe it feels worse. But looking back now, I just wouldn't have done it any other way because I was
Yeah.
doing what I wanted, and that to me is the most important thing. I want to do what I want to do. I want to
I love
work the job I want to work. And
that. Yes.
that's the most important thing, I think.
So, what would you advise to young people who, well, this is kind of a big question, but they're facing the current economic climate, they're graduating college, they're about to graduate college, and they do have big dreams the same way that you did and still do, and the way that I do too. And they might be in more creative industries, or it might be something where there's not this like forged path for them ahead of them, i.e., like going into one of these industries like consulting or finance. What would you advise?
Well, if I may, I'll give an example of my daughter. She's
Yes.
18 years old and wants to be a pilot. Okay.
Oh,
So pilots are being furloughed right now. Nobody's flying.
yeah.
So she could have let that defeat her, but she didn't. She knows what she wants to do. She's going to be a pilot. We're sending her to a expensive school to get pilot training. And so I guess the adjustment she made was she's going to learn how to fly, but she's going to major in aeronautical management. So she'll have a business degree and she'll minor in meteorology. So
Wow.
you could do a lot of different things. I mean, her intention is to fly planes, but God forbid something happens and there's still no one's flying. 4 years from
Right.
now, she has a business management degree, and she has a minor in meteorology. So you could work for NASA, you could work for a TV station, you could work. So I guess my advice would be, don't give up the dream, because if you give
Mm,
up your dream, you're not going to be happy. You're just not. There's nothing
yeah.
that's going to fulfill you as much as what you want to do. But sometimes you do have to have a plan B and even a plan C, and pick the things that are going to be palatable to you. I mean, things that you are going to be able to live with, like
Mhm.
being a pilot and a meteorologist. They kind of go hand in hand. To fly, you need to know the weather. She's interested in that anyway. So maybe she has to work for NASA, telling other pilots what the weather is going to be like, but she's still in the family and doing, being inspired and being in the game that she wants to play. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's amazing advice. Taking like the realistic steps that you can right now, but
Right.
keeping the intention, because
Yes.
I think that goes back to our previous point too about if you have the intention and you see it as a means to an end, you can insert passion right here now in the moment, even if you're not at your fairy tale ending yet.
Right. I think you've hit on something that's very important too. And I wish that younger people would learn this, because it took me a while to learn. It was really kind of after my breast cancer diagnosis, but meditation is so important. And I don't mean sitting in a dark room and ringing a bell. And I don't mean that. I mean, like you just said, putting intentions out there. And the only way you can put intentions out there is to put them in here. You have to believe it first. And before my first anchor job, what I would do, as silly as it sounds, because I was nervous to go from being a reporter to an anchor, because you're live for an hour and anything can happen in live TV. I would take a bath and I would close my eyes, maybe drink a glass of wine, maybe, and visualize myself on the anchor desk doing the job that I was going to do the next day. Literally visualizing myself reading the news. And I know that sounds silly, but it's not
No.
really silly, because you're practicing, and you're practicing in your head, and then it's the final thing you do before you go to sleep. And so those are the thoughts that stay with you when you go to sleep. Sometimes meditation works where you just put earbuds in and you listen to the positive thought of whatever it is that you need to change your thinking about. But I'm a firm believer in that.
Oh, me too. And that reminds me of Michael Phelps, because he did that too. His coach said visualization is half the work. You got to imagine yourself being the first to finish the race, and it would work. He credits a lot of his success to it. And it is that practicing, because so much happens in our minds that I don't even think we fully are able to grasp or understand how like our minds are the central HQ for everything that happens in our lives and everything that we intend to happen. So on the reverse of that, if the night before you go on live television, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to mess up. I always mess up when I say that one word. Whenever I'm nervous, things don't come out right. Like, you're going to get up, in front of the camera tomorrow and things are not going to come out right, because
you're not going to
you
walk
stepped
into
that
it
attention on
confident.
accident.
You're not going to walk into it with confidence. And another thing I've learned in years of being in the business is people don't expect you to be perfect. They really don't. They just expect you to be human and real. So don't get on there and turn on your acting gene. Just be you. Just be you. In fact, when I walked into the second TV station that I'm working at now, my dream job, I went into this news director's office. I'll give you kind of a difference between TV station A, TV station B. So TV station A was all about consulting. Do this, wear this, talk like that, say these very words, people will watch. TV station B, I walked into the news director's office and I said to him, okay, you've hired me for this job. I'm replacing someone who's there for 25 years. What is it that you're looking for? What can I do? What do you want me to be? And he looks up and he goes, just be yourself. We hired you because we liked you. And that's the only advice he's given me in the 5 years I've worked there, is just be myself. And so what it did was lift the pressure off of me, because I'm like, how can you fail at being yourself? Now, not everyone will like you, just like in real life, not everyone's going to like you. But if his sole intention is for you just to be yourself, isn't that great? Then you just
I love that.
Be yourself.
And I think one of the main reasons people feel anxious about going after their big dreams is because of the imposter syndrome part, especially if there's really big dreams. Like, I one day want to have my own talk show. Like, you are like the emblem of something I want to be, in the future. And there's always a part that speaks up and it's like, well, you don't have enough experience, or part of you is not good enough for this, or whatever it is. Like, your experience doesn't match other people's experience levels, but it is about the essence of who you are. And that's why people who have zero experience with something, if they're really meant to do something and they're called to do something and they visualize it enough and they're able to open themselves up to the opportunity, it really does come down to who you are and your essence. And that's something that experience can't compete with necessarily. So you don't have to worry about, you're not an imposter. If you're made for something, if you're meant to do something, you'll have the opportunities to do it, and you'll do it really well.
Something you love, people know that. And by the way, you're building your resume right now. So you're building your resume for your talk show right now. So you are doing it, and it is going to happen. Maybe you'll be the next Oprah, and that would be awesome.
Thank you. That's the goal.
The world needs a new Oprah right now. Although Oprah is still wonderful in what she's doing, but she has kind of left, I think, that opening for the talk show host that everybody wants to watch and trust and loves. And,
that's very true. Got big shoes to fill, but we're coming in hot.
Coming in hot.
Yeah. So another question that I get a lot along the lines of, going after this one big thrilling dream that both excites and terrifies you. There's a lot of people in my TikTok audience specifically, actually, who don't feel like they know what that is. And that's why I started this course called the Purpose Pilot, to help people figure out, what is your biggest dream. The way that I conceptualize it is, if it's not readily apparent to you what that big thing is for you, it's likely that it was invalidated when you were younger. So you did have the dream at one point, but somebody told you couldn't do it, or you perceived that you couldn't do it because you didn't see people in your immediate environment doing it, or you were taught you need to go after something credible or reasonable. Would you agree with that? Or what would your advice be to somebody who's like, I just don't really know what makes my heart race?
Okay, so I do agree with what you're saying, but my experience might be a little different. So when I grew up in the Greenville Little Theater, and I really wanted to be on Broadway. But I did recognize in high school that I wasn't a good enough singer, and I wasn't a good enough dancer, and I probably wasn't going to be successful on Broadway. Doesn't mean I don't still love the theater. Doesn't mean I still So, but I did recognize that. So I started saying to myself in high school, okay, so what could I do that incorporates the things that I love? Well, I love to write, and I've always been writing. And I'm a novelist too. I've published fiction books, so I loved that back in high school. I love the theater, so I love the performance aspect of doing something. I'm nosy as heck. I always want to know what's going on. I am the girl that says who, what, why, where, when, just because I want to know, and I want a front seat to everything that's cool. Okay, because I just do. So if you put all those together, what does that point you towards? It points you to, at least me, a career in television journalism. And so that's how I figured, okay, well, maybe I can't make it on Broadway, but maybe I can do this. So in high school, I joined the newspaper to make sure that I would like it. In college, I worked at the University of Georgia's radio station, the television station, the local, the newspaper, the Red and Black, the local, and I did all this for free just to see if it was exactly what I wanted to do. So sometimes your first love, like, my daughter wants to be an astronaut, but that's her first love. But is she going to go to Mars? Probably not, but she could be a meteorologist for NASA. She could be a pilot for NASA. You see what I'm saying? So I think that you have to be realistic in that if you can't, if you're tone deaf, you're not going to be on American Idol. Okay.
True.
But it doesn't mean that you couldn't be a producer behind the scenes and produce a show like American Idol. So you just have to kind of be realistic, but be focused and find a way to put together what you are good at and what you do love into a career. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's the perfect level of practicality, because there's so many who say, like, shoot for the stars and go after that one big thing, but I also have found that there are two types of goals that don't motivate you. The first is a goal that you are already tracking towards, like, say you're in college, and if you just show up for classes, you're going to graduate. And the second is if the goal is so big, pie in the sky, that you don't see a clear path from where you are currently to the goal. So you're like, what's the point? So the sweet spot in the middle is, it scares you a little bit. Like, when you think about it, you get excited, but you also see a clear path forward. And sometimes that clear path forward is just, let me get into the industry, or let me do a little trial and error and do like what you did, going to the University of Georgia with the radio show. Like let's just try it out. Let's see how it feels.
And I think you also have to just get in the habit of facing your fears. Like I am very afraid to fly. Like, I don't even like Delta, like I know
your daughter wants to be a pilot.
I know, isn't that funny? And my dad was a pilot too. So my dad was a pilot in the Air Force, but I am terrified. So as a journalist, and it's a control thing. It's a control freak thing. Like, I'm a control freak, and I'm not flying the plane, so I don't trust who is. It's a control thing. But
I hear you.
So as a reporter, I got a chance to fly with the Thunderbirds in an F-16.
Wow.
That terrified me, and I almost wasn't going to do it. And then I said, what an idiot you are. Do you know how many people get a chance to fly in an F-16? Not many, and if you turn this down, you're the biggest chicken in the world. Bok, bok, like I would never be able to look at myself in the mirror again if I didn't do it, because how foolish would it be to turn down an opportunity like that? So I flew with it. And that scene with the Thunderbirds ended up in my first book, Alive at 5. So second thing I would say is I was afraid to go out of the country to Cuba and do a story, only because I'd heard communist countries, they follow reporters, and there's a floor in the hotel that you're going to be staying at, and they listen to your telephone conversations, and they follow you around. And some things happened in Cuba that made me believe that is probably true, but I still went, did the story, met my husband. And
what? You met him in Cuba?
Well, I met him in Cuba. He's from Tampa, but his family was one of the families traveling on this trip to Cuba. It's when the Pope went to meet with Fidel Castro. And so Fidel Castro opened up the island to people who were not normally allowed back. And so his family went back, and I met him, interviewed his mom and dad. So it's, again, one of those fate things that if I had not faced a fear, I wouldn't be married with 5 kids right now. So how crazy is that?
See, the thread that I see between those two stories is almost the opposite of what we've been taught our whole lives. It's like, instead you should run towards the fear because there might be some magic in it.
Absolutely.
And even if it's just a really good story for your book one day. Like, people
even
love those stories, you know, you do that, those big thrilling things, because honestly, that's why we were put on this planet. We're not supposed to sit on our couch and watch the world go by. Like, we're supposed to get our heart racing a little bit.
Yeah. And then I faced, the flying thing again. I don't like to fly. A friend said, hey, let me take your daughter up in a plane, small little Cessna. I'm like, okay. Didn't know him, but he took us up, and my daughter flew the plane. She flew it over the Buck Stadium, over the beach, over the Skyway. And I realized in that moment that I was witness to her discovering her passion. And if I had been afraid to do it, if I had said, I'm sorry, I wouldn't have let her do it without me, because, I didn't really know this person. So I went for her. And then I sat back and thought, oh my God, I am witnessing my daughter discover what she's going to do in life. And
that's so powerful.
what if fear had held me back and she had never discovered that?
Yeah, because we also sometimes think about our journeys with our fear and going after our passions as very individual or solo journeys. But I'm also a big believer that when you do something that originally scared you, but it really brings you to life, it inspires the people around you, your friends, your family. If you have children, it models to them what it looks like to live a life where it's not necessarily fearless because you're feeling the fear and you're doing it anyway, but you're living a life marked by courage.
Yeah, absolutely. I think these little lessons are learned throughout your life, and I guess I'm talking about my family a lot. I hope that's okay. But
no, I love it.
So my eldest daughter, we invited her in. We always knew she had like this love for medicine. So she was in the room when her two younger sisters were born, like watching the delivery. And a lot of people said to me, that's gross. Like, why would you let her in? But you know what? She's in her 4th year of medical, and she is now probably going to be a breast surgeon and operate on women with breast cancer. And I do believe it's because, we kind of bucked the system. My husband and I, people were like, oh, you're not going to let your daughter in there. Your legs are in the stirrups. It's gross. But she showed a passion for medicine. And so even she was probably like 11, 12 when she saw her first sibling, her sister born. Now she's gonna be a doctor. So you just never know.
Wow.
Like, sometimes you just gotta do what you feel in your gut is right and not listen to the naysayers who are like, that's wrong.
I completely agree.
You know?
So do you have like 3 quick tips for somebody who is scared out of their minds because, maybe they want to quit their job and go after a passion, or maybe they're graduating from college, or just, they're coping with the fear because it sounds really great and fun to be like, oh yeah, I was scared of something and I did it. Now it's a great story.
Right.
But when you're in the moment, it's completely something else entirely, and you lose sleep over it, and it could just be a really hard moment. So what would you advise?
So my first tip would be practice meditation and learn how to control your thoughts, because your thoughts are your worst enemy sometimes. So instead of saying, I'm afraid to do this, you can say, I want to do this. I want to do this. Okay. Second thing is you need to be able to control your physical body too. Like, instead of having a panic attack and not being able to breathe, if you learn how, again, this is kind of a meditative thing, but if you learn how to breathe deeply, take a big breath in and a big breath out, even if you have to like hide, I don't know, in a room somewhere so people don't think you're nuts, you will lower your blood pressure. You will change the physical reaction in your body. You will be able to breathe again. You will be able to think again. So first learn how to control your mind, and you won't be able to do it always. Learn how to control what's happening physically with your body. My third tip would be do the research, do the work. Do the research, do the work. So if you're going after a job, don't do the work, do the research, find out who it is who's the doorkeeper, who is holding the door that's keeping you from getting in. Then find out about that person, find out how to reach that person, find out their interests, do the work. A lot of people let the fear thing, they're all wrapped up in that. No, if you're prepared, you're going to feel more confident. So you're going to walk in knowing the answers to the questions before they even ask, because you know the person that you're about to address. Does that all make sense?
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love that those are 3 things that you can practice and you can control. Yes. Because, faith, trying to have faith in the moments of fear. It's hard.
Right.
But if that's something that you can almost plan for, even if it's something where, okay, like 1 to 2 years from now, your contract is up with a company or you don't have to pay back the signing bonus. So in the meantime, you're going to practice your visualization. You're going to do that research in that time and start to build those connections. That really does help against fear because it shows your body and like your logical mind, like everything's fine. We can calm like the alarms that are going off and our sympathetic nervous system.
Another thing my husband taught me was only worry about the things that you can control and not the things that you can't. In other words, if you end up working one day for a boss that doesn't like you, you can't control that. So don't beat yourself up. Whatever it is, if you're working hard and you're doing the job and you're not messing up and this person doesn't like you, you cannot control what they're thinking. You cannot control their opinion. You can only control your reaction to it. Exactly. My advice in that is it's time to get another job. Yes. Start doing the research and get out, but don't let that person defeat you. You can't control them, just control what you're doing.
Absolutely. Another note along control, and maybe it could be our last question, is what is something that you have been rejected for that obviously like rejection is outside of your control, and how did you cope with it?
Well, I always wanted to write fiction. It's just been my passion. And I spent 10 years trying to get a book published. And so I have a book of rejections. It's honest to God bigger than my first book. And at first it's really hurtful.
Yeah.
But then I just started taking the advice of the people who took the time, because most of the time they don't. Most of the time when you're rejected, it's a form letter and you have no idea why you suck because they're not telling you. And I understand people are busy, but every once in a while you're going to find the people that will take the time. And so if they take the time to tell you what you're doing wrong and what isn't quite good enough yet, no matter what it is, for me it was writing fiction and getting a book published, but whatever it is, listen to them and don't take it personally. Again, you can't control other people's opinions, but if someone is giving you criticism from a good place, they're trying to help you, listen to it and try to improve. And again, just don't ever give up. I can tell you how satisfying it was. My first book didn't make a lot of money. It really wasn't about that for me. It was about getting to the point where it was good enough that a company believed in me and published my book. Now I'll get better. And, hopefully one day I'll be a New York Times bestselling author. I'm not there yet, but I'll never forget. And I've kept the rejections. I've kept the rejections not to be hurtful, but to remember how far I've come. And what it took to get there, so that I'm appreciative, even if I release a book and it doesn't make me a multimillionaire. It's like,
Yes, I love that because it's so much more satisfying. I mean, if you would send it to that first publisher and they'd be like, "Whoa, yes, we're publishing it." I mean, that would have been cool and all. Like we wouldn't have said no to that scenario. However, it was tenfold more satisfying when it's something that you really have worked for. And it seems like you've done a really good job of a phrase that I call numbing the no. So every single time you hear no, I mean, obviously it's going to sting, it's going to sting, it's going to sting. But over time, the sting is going to get a little bit more dull and you're going to realize that no doesn't mean you're not good enough or you're not talented enough. It just means it's not the right fit for me. And if you're not the right fit for a job or an opportunity, that means it wasn't the right fit for you either.
Yeah, you wouldn't be happy doing it probably if it's not a good fit.
Or something would have been weird about it, or you just never know. You wouldn't have worked well with like the agent or whatever it is.
Right. So yes.
Wow, well, I feel empowered after this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for inviting me on. I love to talk about positive things and helping people follow their dreams, because honestly, my whole career, whether I was making $13,000 or, a whole lot more than that, it's just been satisfying and fun. And I look forward to getting up and going to work every day. And I enjoy the journey, and the rewards eventually come. But it's been a great career, and I wouldn't change it for anything. And so I like to empower people to follow their dreams, even if it's not easy.
Yeah, you're a true role model and going after all of the big dreams, and you have quite a story that has really inspired me. So I'm glad my listeners got to hear from you and be inspired by you.
So nice to meet you.
Nice.
Can't wait till you have your own talk show, and I believe it will happen. I believe I'm putting it out there.
Thank you so much. Visualize with me.
Yes, I will.
I love it.